Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, February 18, 2025. Secretary of State Macro Rubio says after meeting with top Russian government officials that the two countries have agreed to start working together to end the war in Ukraine and improve diplomatic and economic ties between the U.S. and Russia, starting with reestablishing embassy staffs. New York Governor Kathy Hochul, a Democrat, holds meetings with elected officials and community leaders in New York City over whether to exercise her power to remove New York City Mayor Eric Adams, also a Democrat, from office, over whether the federal government improperly dropped criminal charges against the mayor in exchange for his help on immigration enforcement. President Donald Trump is asked about the status of Elon Musk, whether he's really in charge of DOGE, the government-cutting Department of Government Efficiency, after a court filing raises some doubts. U.S. Senate plans to start this week on the Senate Republican version of a budget resolution that will fund part of their and the president's agenda for border security and defense. And the Senate also voting on more cabinet nominations, including Howard Lutnick for Commerce Secretary and Kash Patel for FBI Director. Associated Press reporting from Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, that Russia and the U.S. agreed Tuesday to start working toward ending the war in Ukraine and improving their diplomatic and economic ties, the two countries' top diplomats said after talks that reflected an extraordinary about-face in U.S. foreign policy under President Donald Trump. In an interview with the Associated Press after the meeting, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the two sides agreed broadly to pursue three goals: to restore staffing at their respective embassies in Washington and Moscow, to create a high-level team to support Ukrainian peace talks, and to explore closer relations and economic cooperation. He stressed, however, that the talks, which were attended by his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov and other senior Russian and U.S. officials, marked the beginning of a conversation, and more work needs to be done. That was from Associated Press. Secretary Rubio and another member of the U.S. delegation, White House National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, were asked at a news conference whether Russia would be able to keep captured Ukrainian territory.
Is it acceptable to the U.S. for Russia to retain any territory that is annexed since the beginning of the war in February 2022?
Well, I think those are things that those are to be discussed, and those are things that will start and do the tough work ahead. But the important thing is that we've started that process, and what the president did not find acceptable was an endless war in Europe. That was literally has turned into a meat grinder of people on both sides. So if you just think about, just in a few months, President Trump has shifted the entire global conversation from not if the war is going to end, but just how it's going to end. And only President Trump can do that. And in the Oval Office less than a week ago, both President Putin and President Zelensky both said to him, only you, President Trump, could drive this war to a conclusion.
What concessions do you expect?
Well, again, we're not going to pre-negotiate an end to this conflict. These are the kinds of things that have to happen through hard and difficult diplomacy in closed rooms over a period of time. What's important to understand is two things. The first is the only leader in the world who can make this happen, who can even bring people together to begin to talk about it in a serious way, is President Trump. He's the only one in the world that can do that right now. The second thing I would say is that in order for a conflict to end, everyone involved in that conflict has to be okay with it. It has to be acceptable to them. But we have to understand that it's been 3.5 years since there's been any sort of regularized contact between the United States and Russia, and in some cases between any of the participants in this conflict and Russia. So the goal of today's meeting was to follow up on the phone call the President had a week ago and begin to establish those lines of communication. The work remains. Today is the first step of a long and difficult journey, but an important one. And President Trump is committed to bringing an end to this conflict, and as he said when he campaigned for president. And he wants it to end in a way that's fair. He wants it to end in a way that's sustainable and enduring, not that leads to another conflict in 2 to 3 years. That's not going to be easy to achieve, but he's the only one in the world that can begin that process. Donald Trump is the only leader in the world that could initiate that process, and today was the first step in that process.
Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and before that you heard White House National Security Advisor Michael Waltz at a news conference in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. A third member of the U.S. team, Steve Witkoff, U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, sitting beside them at the news conference. Back to the Associated Press article, no Ukrainian officials were present at the meeting, which came as the beleaguered country is slowly but steadily losing ground against more numerous Russian troops in a grinding war that began nearly 3 years ago. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said his country would not accept any outcome from the talks since Kyiv didn't take part, and he postponed his own trip to the kingdom, Saudi Arabia, scheduled for Wednesday. European leaders have also expressed concerns that they are being sidelined. That was from Associated Press. Secretary Rubio and Advisor Waltz were asked about this as well.
The Ukrainians and the Europeans have suggested they feel very sidelined about how the process has played out so far. How do you intend to address their concerns? And will they be incorporated in future meetings in a multilateral way?
Well, the comment I would have on that is that for 3.5 years while this conflict has raged, or 3 years while it's raged, no one else has been able to bring something together like what we saw today, because Donald Trump is the only leader in the world that can. So no one is being sidelined here, but President Trump is in a position that he campaigned on to initiate a process that could bring about an end to this conflict. And from that could emerge some very positive things for the United States, for Europe, for Ukraine, for the world. But first it begins by the end of this conflict. And so the only thing President Trump's trying to do is bring about peace. It's what he campaigned on. It's something the world should be thanking President Trump for doing. He's been able to achieve what for 2.5, 3 years no one else has been able to achieve, which is to begin this process, a serious process. Obviously, a lot of work remains before we have a result, but President Trump's the only one that can do it.
Look, it's common sense. If you're going to bring both sides together, you have to talk to both sides. And we'll continue to remind everyone, literally within minutes of President Trump hanging up with President Putin, he called and spoke with President Zelensky. So shuttle diplomacy has happened throughout history. It's happened all over the world. We are absolutely talking to both sides. The Secretary of State just met with President Zelensky days ago, along with the Vice President, 7 cabinet members in Europe at the same time, really showing the importance of engaging our allies. President Trump spoke with President Macron just yesterday. Prime Minister Starmer is coming to Washington next week. So I think the facts will continue to push back on this notion that our allies haven't been consulted. They are being consulted literally almost on a daily basis, and will continue to do so.
White House National Security Advisor Michael Waltz and U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio at the news conference in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, after they met with the top Russian officials. The Kyiv Independent newspaper says that Russian President Volodymyr Zelensky reiterated that no decisions about Ukraine's future can be made without Kyiv's involvement. He also said he expects U.S. officials to visit Ukraine, confirming that President Trump's special envoy for Ukraine, Keith Kellogg, will arrive in Kyiv on February 19th. The Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov held his own news conference in Riyadh.
Well, to prevent any attempts to disrupt this resumption of relationships between Russia and the US, we need to continue. And after this meeting, I can say that it's been quite a success. The conceptual approach to further steps, it was laid down by the presidents during their phone call, and we felt great attitude and willingness of our American counterparts to push this forward actively, and we're going to do the same.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov in Saudi Arabia. That audio from RT, the Russian government-funded news network. U.S. Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican of Pennsylvania, posting on X, Putin is now asking for a new election in Ukraine conducted in a specific manner that he can influence so that he can install his puppet and accomplish that which he couldn't militarily. Nice try, Vladimir. Try holding a free and fair election in your own country first without imprisoning your opponents. You have zero credibility, and the United States and Europe will not cave to your ridiculous demands. Recognize and respect Ukraine's sovereignty and independence, or deal with the consequences. There is an outcome-determinative number of members of Congress who feel the same, and we are fully prepared to do whatever is necessary to preserve world peace. That was a post from Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick, Republican of Pennsylvania. President Donald Trump was asked about the talks and this demand from Russia at a news conference in Mar-a-Lago, Florida.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Russia talks, your impression of how they went today, and if you're perhaps more confident or less confident of a deal after what happened today?
Well, much more confident. They were very good. Russia wants to do something. They want to stop the savage barbarianism. I mean, what's going on over there? It's soldiers are being killed by the thousands on a weekly basis. It's ridiculous. And they're not American soldiers. They're Russian soldiers, and they're Ukrainian soldiers largely, although a lot of Koreans have been killed, as you know. Quite a bit of them have been killed. They came over to fight, and a large portion have been wiped out. But we want to end it. It's a senseless war. It should have never happened, would have never happened if I was president, and it's a shame to see it. And I see pictures that you don't see, but I see pictures of fields that look just horrible. It looks like Gettysburg. If you see the old pictures of Gettysburg, it's soldiers lying all over the field, body parts all over the field. They're all dead. And this is going on a daily basis. It's a horrible thing. Both Russia and Ukraine, they're losing thousands and thousands of soldiers, and a lot of people have been killed, too. I think that's one of the things that you'll see historically, and you'll see later on as it goes along. I think people are going to be surprised at how many people, not only soldiers, have been killed in Ukraine. A lot more people than you think.
President Donald Trump at a news conference at his home and private club in Mar-a-Lago, Florida. Story from Reuters. Republican U.S. House Representative Speaker Mike Johnson said on Monday the survival of the West depended on countries prioritizing their own national interests before extending a helping hand to their neighbors. Speaking via video link at the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, or ARC, conference in London, Johnson argued the U.S. could only maintain its strength and leadership if its foreign policy was centered on its national interest. Johnson did not specifically reference Ukraine in his remarks. Reporting from Reuters, here's part of Speaker Johnson's speech.
American leadership clearly did help bring about decades of peace and economic growth and prosperity for the Western democracies. In America, we still believe in peace through strength, and we still understand our role in the world. A strong America is good for free people everywhere because it helps to keep the terrorists and the tyrants at bay. But to maintain our strength and leadership, our foreign policy must be centered on our own national interest. It's a matter of common sense for each of our countries to acknowledge that we must each take care of our own houses before we help take care of the neighborhood. As we seek to make America safer, stronger, and more prosperous, we will encourage all our friends and allies to do the same in and for their own countries. The survival of the West will depend upon that. And this is how we will turn the tides, by refocusing and marshaling our many shared interests toward our own national interest. Recent elections in places like France and Italy, the Netherlands, and Germany signal that millions of freedom-loving people around the world share our concerns about unchecked power and the erosion of national sovereignty. As leaders in government, academia, media, and the arts, we must be prepared to steer their aims toward policies and mediating institutions that reduce government dominion over our lives and advance prosperity. In short, we must not let this civilizational moment pass us by. So how do we do it? Very quickly, as leaders, we should be working at every level to shift control away from established power centers and back to the people. The local school board will not be nearly as powerful if there's a thriving parent-teacher association holding them accountable. The county commission's grip on zoning laws is weakened when neighborhoods take control of development initiatives. And organizations like the World Economic Forum lose their dominance when organizations like our ARC seek to challenge their hegemony. History has proven that centralized governments thrive when their subjects are powerless and indifferent. If we want to protect our rights from tyranny, we have to focus, work, and build closest to home. And we must hold our elected leaders accountable.
House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, speaking by video link to the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, or ARC, conference in London on Monday. ARC was founded in 2023. Story from CNN. Hamas on Tuesday said it will release the dead bodies of 4 Israeli hostages on Thursday, including the 2 youngest people held by the group. The group will also release 6 living hostages on Saturday instead of the 3 that had been expected, the head of the group's negotiating team said in a statement. U.S. Senator Roger Wicker, Republican of Mississippi, delivered on the Senate floor today in Washington the annual reading of President George Washington's 1796 farewell address. It's tradition in the Senate since 1896, alternating political parties. Part of that address, which runs over 7,600 words, warns against permanent alliances and entanglements with other countries.
The great rule of conduct for us in regard to foreign nations is in extending our commercial relations to have with them as little political connection as possible. So as far as we've already formed engagements, let them be fulfilled with perfect good faith. Here, let us stop. Europe has a set of primary interests, which to us have none or very remote relation. Hence, she must be engaged in frequent controversies, the causes of which are essentially foreign to our concerns. Hence, therefore, it must be unwise in us to implicate ourselves by artificial ties in the ordinary vicissitudes of her politics or the ordinary combinations and collisions of her friendships or enmities. Our detached and distant situation invites and enables us to pursue a different course. If we remain one people under an efficient government, the period is not far off when we may defy material injury from external annoyance. When we may take such an attitude as will cause the neutrality we may at any time resolve upon to be scrupulously respected. When belligerent nations, under the impossibility of making acquisitions upon us, will not likely hazard the giving us provocation. When we may choose peace or war as our interest, guided by justice, shall counsel. Why forego the advantages of so peculiar a situation? Why quit our own to stand upon foreign ground? Why, by interweaving our destiny with that of any part of Europe, entangle our peace and prosperity in the toils of European ambition, rivalship, interest, humor, or caprice? It is our true policy to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world. So far, I mean, as we are now at liberty to do it, for let me not be understood as capable of patronizing infidelity to existing engagements. I hold the maximum no less applicable to public than to private affairs, that honesty is always the best policy. I repeat it, therefore, let those engagements be observed in their genuine sense, but in my opinion, it is unnecessary and would be unwise to extend them.
Senator Roger Wicker, Republican of Mississippi, on the Senate floor reading President George Washington's 1796 farewell address, continuing the annual President's Day tradition in the Senate. Senate.gov has a page on this that reads, at the conclusion of each reading, the appointed senator inscribes his or her name and brief remarks in a black leather-bound book maintained by the Secretary of the Senate. The book's first entry is dated February 22nd, 1900. This is Washington Today. Story from the New York Times. Governor Kathy Hochul raised the prospect of removing Mayor Eric Adams from office late Monday and met with key leaders, in quotes, in Manhattan on Tuesday to discuss the path forward with the goal of ensuring stability for the city of New York. She said in a statement, overturning the will of the voters is a serious step that should not be taken lightly. That said, the alleged conduct at City Hall that has been reported over the past 2 weeks is troubling and cannot be ignored. The governor was referring to comments from the federal prosecutor in Mr. Adams' criminal case that the mayor's lawyers had offered the White House a quid pro quo, helping President Trump's immigration crackdown in return for dropping the charges. Her comments followed the resignation of 4 of Mr. Adams' deputy mayors, including his second-in-command, amid criticism that the mayor has put his own interests above those of New Yorkers. Reporting from the New York Times. One of the meetings today was with Al Sharpton, president of the National Action Network, who spoke to the press.
I had a meeting around 35 minutes with the governor and expressed to her my concern about what is going on in the city and the state. Let's make no mistake about it, that we are in this position because President Trump, who pardoned people that were videotaped physically assaulting people January 6th, if he really felt that Eric Adams had become a subject to a political vendetta, which is what his defense is, then why did he pardon him? Now make it clear, I'm not asking for a pardon. I'm talking about the inconsistency that led to this. The only reason that we are facing a court hearing tomorrow, and the only reason that the governor has to make a decision to do something or not do something that has not been done in 235 years is because there was a double standard used on Eric Adams' case, that those that he claims he believed were victims. I do not believe that he should have gotten a pardon, but I believe that Donald Trump has been inconsistent. Having said that, the governor said to me that she's going to see what the judge decides tomorrow and keep deliberating with other leaders. My feeling is that the faith of the city people have been shaken, and there needs to be a resolve, but at the same time we must protect the law and not establish a precedent that could come back to haunt us.
Do you believe he should be removed? The governor should remove him.
I just answered that.
What was the first question the governor asked you?
Yes, I did. Right? That's my answer.
Well, what's the first question the governor asked you?
My answer is that we're going to wait and see what the judge says tomorrow, so that we do not set a precedent that, suppose if today she removed him saying because he's been indicted, and the judge says tomorrow I'm throwing out the indictment. So it would be premature to say that.
Al Sharpton, president of the National Action Network, speaking to reporters on the streets of New York City. A federal judge has ordered a hearing for Wednesday about the reasons for dismissing the charges against Mayor Eric Adams, who has maintained his innocence of the federal bribery and corruption charges and said there was no quid pro quo to help the federal government in immigration matters in return for the case being dropped, and also that he will not resign. U.S. Senator Christopher Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, put up a video about this situation.
So I want to tell you why the dismissal of charges against the mayor of New York, Eric Adams, is such a big deal. Dictators and despots, they use law enforcement to try to compel loyalty. They threaten you with arrest. If you're not loyal, they will let you get away with crimes if you are loyal. That's what's happening in America today. That's exactly what just happened in New York City. Eric Adams was under indictment for serious corruption. And the Trump administration, the Trump White House, went to him and said, regardless of whether you've committed crimes, we will dismiss the charges as long as you pledge loyalty to Donald Trump and specifically his immigration policy. They cut a deal. They were pretty unapologetic about it. Eric Adams literally went on TV to announce the deal, and now the charges are dropped. Now, of course, that is a fundamental corruption of democracy. 6 high-level Department of Justice officials resigned because they refused to dismiss the charges. Finally, Trump found a 7th who would. 4 of Eric Adams's deputy mayors resigned because they could not be part of this kind of corruption. But this is the death of our democracy that is literally happening as we speak. If the President of the United States can threaten you with arrest if you aren't loyal, or can let people get away with crimes because they are loyal, we don't have the rule of law in this country any longer. This isn't like a funny, interesting New York City story. This is the descent of democracy into smithereens right in front of our eyes. And just because they are transparent and brazen and public in their corruption doesn't mean that it isn't corruption. Everybody in this country who wants to make sure that law enforcement, that the police, that our courts are on the level, need to be raising an alarm right now about what just happened in New York and what that means for the future of law enforcement in this country.
Senator Christopher Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, putting up that video. Story from Fox News. The Department of Homeland Security launched a multi-million-dollar advertising campaign on Tuesday directed at those who try and come to the United States illegally, saying, "Don't try it." There are 2 versions of the ad, according to the DHS. One is set to run domestically, and the other is set to run internationally. That was the Fox News article. Here is the domestic ad.
I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you, President Donald J. Trump, for securing our border, for deporting criminal illegal immigrants, and for putting America first. President Trump has a clear message for those that are in our country illegally. Leave now. If you don't, we will find you, and we will deport you. You will never return. For too long, weak politicians left our borders wide open. They flooded our communities with drugs, human trafficking, and violent criminals. They put American lives at risk. Well, those days are over. If you leave now, you may have an opportunity to return and enjoy our freedom and live the American dream. But understand this. Under President Trump, America's borders are closed to lawbreakers. Follow the law, and you'll find opportunity. Break it, and you'll find consequences. The choice is yours. America welcomes those who respect our laws, because a strong nation is a safe nation.
That ad released by the Department of Homeland Security with the Secretary, Kristi Noem. Story from News Nation. In a historic moment in Texas border security, the Texas National Guard has now been officially deputized under Title VIII, giving them the authority to execute immigration enforcement duties. On Friday, the first 300 Texas Military Department soldiers were sworn in, taking an oath to assist Border Patrol in enforcing immigration laws. Now they can apprehend and detain individuals who cross illegally, no longer just monitoring and waiting for Border Patrol to take action. Reporting from News Nation. The U.S. Senate is voting tonight on a few cabinet nominations. First, to confirm Howard Lutnick for Commerce Secretary, and then to advance Kash Patel for FBI Director. Senator Markwayne Mullin, Republican of Oklahoma, writing on X on Monday, "We've known since day one Kash Patel will be a game changer for the FBI. Tomorrow we'll take a procedural vote that will allow Thune," referring to the Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, "to file cloture. All that means is Kash has the votes. As promised, I'll post updates throughout the week." Senator Mullin attached a video.
Hey guys, I'm here with Kash, getting ready to kick off this whole nomination process. You excited about it?
I'm very excited, sir.
One thing that we have to do is we got to reform the FBI. Not that necessarily the agents in the field, man, they do a phenomenal job. But what's going on in the 7th floor, the Hoover building? They've weaponized the FBI. And the guy to clean that up and get the FBI back focused on doing their job, and that's to keep Americans safe and look out for American interests, that's Kash. Kash, you got anything you want to say?
Senator, I'm humbled and honored by your support, and I look forward to the advice and consent process to earn the trust and confidence of your colleagues and restore truth and transparency to the FBI. It's almost like you had to rehearse.
That is like a rehearsal. Good, guys. Good to see you all.
Senator Markwayne Mullin, Republican of Oklahoma, and FBI Director nominee Kash Patel in a video on Monday. The procedural vote is tonight, Tuesday, and Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, ranking member on the Judiciary Committee, made a statement on the Senate floor.
It is a 10-year appointment, unusual by Senate standards, but was designed to be 10 years so it would be depoliticized. It is unfortunate that the Republicans are moving ahead despite the many problems with Mr. Patel's record. Mr. Patel has no experience, none, in administration and management, particularly of an organization like the FBI that has 38,000 agents and employees, 38,000. It is the premier criminal investigative agency in our country and perhaps the world. After meeting with Mr. Patel and reviewing his record and questioning him under oath at his hearing, I am deeply concerned about his fitness to serve as FBI director. He has neither the experience, the judgment, nor the temperament to lead the FBI. My Senate Republican colleagues, sadly, are willfully ignoring myriad red flags about Mr. Patel, especially his recurring instinct to threaten retribution against his political enemies and President Trump's perceived enemies. This is an extremely dangerous characteristic for someone who seeks to lead the nation's most powerful domestic investigative agency for the next 10 years. Mr. Patel on day one plans to quote, I quote him directly, he said this now, on day one as director of the FBI plans to, quote, shut down the FBI Hoover building and reopen it the next day as a museum of the deep state, close quote. He even wrote a book on the subject, and I punished myself by requiring that I read it from cover to cover so I understood exactly what this man believed.
Senator Dick Durbin, Democrat from Illinois, on the Senate floor. The procedural vote on the Kash Patel nomination is tonight. If it passes, a confirmation vote could happen later this week. Story from NBC News. Leonard Peltier, the Native American activist who has always maintained his innocence in the killing of 2 FBI agents 50 years ago, was released Tuesday morning from a federal prison in Florida after then-President Joe Biden commuted his 2 life sentences. The act of clemency permits Peltier, who is 80 years old and has been in declining health for years, to serve his remaining days in home confinement. Peltier is being transferred to his birthplace in North Dakota, where he's a citizen of the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, and will be welcomed with celebrations to, quote, reconnect with his home community and adjust back into life among his people, the NDN Collective, an indigenous-led advocacy organization, said in a statement. Reporting from NBC News. Washington Today continues in a moment.
Democracy. It isn't just an idea, it's a process shaped by leaders elected to the highest offices and entrusted to a select few with guarding its basic principles. It's where debates unfold, decisions are made, and the nation's course is charted. Democracy in real time. This is your government at work. This is C-SPAN, giving you your democracy unfiltered.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the free C-SPAN Now mobile app and wherever you get your podcasts. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, posting on X, it is time to act on the decisive mandate the American people gave to President Trump in November, securing the border, rebuilding our defense, and unleashing American energy. That starts this week with passing Chairman Lindsey Graham's budget. He's referring to Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina, chair of the Budget Committee. And the budget resolution that will be up for consideration is $340 billion, covering border security and defense. The Senate Minority Leader, Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, spoke about this on the Senate floor today.
This week will mark 1 month since Donald Trump was sworn in as president. In this first month, Donald Trump has waged a scorched earth campaign against the rule of law and against the very system of checks and balances that kept America together for 2.5 centuries. Why? Why are they doing this? Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and the Republicans are doing it all for one simple goal. They're trying to give their billionaire buddies a tax break and have you, the American people, pay the cost. This week, Senate Republicans will take the next major step to achieving Donald Trump's agenda here on the Senate floor. Senate Democrats will expose Republicans' reconciliation budget bill for exactly what it is, a sinister front for clearing the way to cut taxes for Donald Trump's billionaire friends. This is going to be a long, drawn-out fight. This reconciliation budget bill is only the first step, albeit an important one. Democrats are glad to have this debate with the Republicans. We will show the hollowness of Republicans' arguments on cutting waste. We will expose Republican attempts to cut health care, to cut Medicaid, to cut housing, to cut NIH, to empower DOGE, so it incinerates basic services that help tens of millions of people. Also, Republicans can help their billionaire buddies with another tax break.
The Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor. The first Senate budget resolution that will be up this week, $340 billion just for border security and defense. The House version, which could come up next week, the House is not in session this week, calls for $4.5 trillion in tax cuts, $1.5 trillion in spending cuts, another $2 trillion in cuts to mandatory parts of the federal budget like Medicare, Medicaid, and food assistance, SNAP. Steve Scalise, the House Majority Leader, Republican from Louisiana, posting on X, it's time to act on all of the powerful mandates the American people gave to President Trump in November, securing the border, opening up American energy to lower costs, keeping tax rates low, including no tax on tips, strengthening our national defense, a 2-year extension of the debt ceiling, and passing into law DOJ's identified waste in government. All of Trump's priorities in one big, beautiful bill starts moving when we pass Congressman Jody Arrington's budget. Let's go make America great again. That post from Congressman Steve Scalise. He's referring to the House Budget Committee Chair Jody Arrington, Republican of Texas, who was interviewed Monday on KCBT TV in Lubbock.
You guys spent hours marking it up. Where did we end up? What's in that resolution?
Yeah, nothing like a 12-hour hearing to make you second guess your chairmanship. But look, it's the most important position in Congress right now, because the budget resolution is going to be the legislative vehicle for the preponderance of policies in the America First agenda. It's got tax, it's got energy, reining in spending, and then, of course, important resources for our commander-in-chief to secure the border and strengthen our military and our military readiness. So there is not a more consequential piece of legislation, probably in my lifetime. And we were able to get it out of the House. We've now the various policy committees will write the policy aspects of the bill. We'll roll it up and we'll send it to the House. The House and Senate have to agree. They have to agree on the targets for cutting taxes and cutting spending. And but I think we're all in agreement in terms of the objectives, and we'll work out the details at the committee level. But a lot of folks didn't think we could get it out of committee. We only have 2 seats, a 2-seat margin in the House, so it's a very thin margin, but we got a lot of momentum, and I'm excited to be in the role that I'm in, because these policies are certainly going to change course, important direction for our country that will help keep us safer, stronger, and more prosperous going forward.
Congressman Jody Arrington, Republican of Texas, the Budget Committee Chair, interviewed on KCBD TV, Lubbock, Texas, on Monday. The House is not in this week, so the budget resolution could come up next week. TheHill.com has an article. The House GOP's budget resolution could be in jeopardy of not clearing the full chamber amid concerns from moderates over likely cuts to social safety net programs, particularly Medicaid, with a handful undecided on whether they will support the key measure. Congressman David Valadao, Republican of California, and Nicole Maliotakis, Republican of New York, both of whom represent districts with a significant percentage of Medicaid recipients, told The Hill that they are withholding support from the budget resolution as they seek more information on the severity of the cuts and how they could impact their constituents, and they are not alone. Valadao said there are at least double digits of people who are severely concerned. That reporting from The Hill. From AP, a judge on Tuesday will consider whether to temporarily block the Trump administration from carrying out mass layoffs across the federal government in one of the several lawsuits challenging Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency's large-scale efforts to slash the federal workforce. Lawsuit filed last week by a coalition of 5 federal workers' unions alleges that the Trump administration's ongoing efforts to fire massive numbers of federal employees across multiple agencies, including its recent deferred resignation offer to more than 2 million federal employees, violates Congress's power to establish a federal workforce, as well as federal procedures that dictate how the workforce should be reduced. That was from an AP article. President Donald Trump was asked about the workings of DOGE at his news conference today, Mar-a-Lago, Florida.
In a court filing, the White House said that Elon Musk is not a DOGE employee and has no authority to make decisions. Can you clarify for us today
well, Elon
what
Musk,
his exact role is there?
Yeah. Elon is, to me, a patriot. So, you could call him an employee, you could call him a consultant, you could call him whatever you want. But he's a patriot. I mean, look at the kind of things I just said. Just write it down, just in case that question got asked, right? And which I'm surprised it took so long, actually. But you know what? Ukraine's a bigger deal because people are dying by the thousands a week, thousands. But look at this, from 90 to 99, Social Security, 6,054,000 people. Well, that's okay. Maybe that's possible. 90 to 99, maybe it's possible. That's a lot of people, though, at that. But people that live to 100 to 109, 4,734,000. Wow, that's a lot. That means over 100 years old. There are 4 million people. I don't know too many. I know people that are doing great in their 90s, but not too many people over 100. But over 120, from 120 years old, people that are 120 years old up to 129, 3,472,000 people. Wow. You know that can't possibly be, because the record is like, I think it's one person, a woman, lived to 127, but they have 3,472. Okay, but now we're going really in. People from 130 years old to 139-year-old, 3,936,000. Wow. I wonder if people are getting paid with all this. I mean, are these checks? And that's what we're checking right now. People from 140 years old to 149 years old, 3,542,000, 140 years old and beyond. Now we're really going, because we're looking to break the record by 25 years. People from 150 years old to 159 years old, 1,345,000. These are in the, by the way, these are in the computer files. This is what they do well. They're super. I asked Elon, who are these Doge people? He said they're super brilliant computer people and they love the country. It's simple. Wait a minute. People from 160 years old to 169 years, 121,000. So 160-year-old people. 170 to 179,000, 6,087. But now, let's go into the real numbers. From 200 to 209 years old, 879 people. From 210 years old, I haven't met any of them. And if I did, I would bless them. I would worship the ground they walk on.
President Donald Trump at his news conference in Mar-a-Lago, Florida. You can find the full news conference, runs just over a half hour, at our website, cspan.org. New York Post also reports that President Trump signed an executive order Tuesday meant to begin fulfilling a campaign pledge to make in vitro fertilization free for prospective parents. The document requires the White House Domestic Policy Council, led by Vince Haley, to examine steps towards accomplishing the goal. And from Federal News Network, Postmaster General Louis DeJoy is planning to step down from his role and is calling on the Postal Service Board of Governors to start looking for a successor. DeJoy, in a letter dated Monday, told the USPS Board of Governors to begin searching for a new Postmaster General. DeJoy took office in June 2020. USPS is about midway through DeJoy's 10-year reform plan. The agency has yet to reach its break-even financial targets, but reported a rare net profit for the first quarter of fiscal 2025. USPS, however, still anticipates ending fiscal year 2025 with a $6.9 billion net loss, part of the reporting from Federal News Network. Wall Street today, the Dow up 10, NASDAQ up 14, S&P also up 14. From ABC News, as investigators work to determine what caused Delta Flight 4819 to crash and overturn at Toronto Pearson International Airport on Monday, the Toronto Pearson president and CEO noted the extreme conditions at the airport in the days before the dramatic incident. Toronto Pearson President and CEO Deborah Flint said that from Thursday to Sunday, there were extreme conditions at the airport from two separate storms. That was from ABC News. Deborah Flint spoke at a news conference at the airport. She would not speculate on the possible cause of the crash, but said it was a miracle that nobody was killed.
It's really important to recognize how grateful we are that there was no loss of life or life-threatening injuries in yesterday's accident. You know, every time you board a flight, you are greeted by flight attendants and by flight crew often. It's their job to make us comfortable and confident about the flight ahead, and they do an incredible job with that. But we saw the most important role that they play in action yesterday. The crew of Delta Flight 4819 heroically led passengers to safety, evacuating a jet that had overturned on the runway on landing that was amidst smoke and fire. I thank each and every one of these heroes, every flight attendant and crew member on Delta Flight 4819. I also thank every flight attendant and crew member across the industry. Thank you for all that you do every day and every night in service of safe air travel. In regards to the accident yesterday, at approximately 2:15 p.m., Delta Airlines Flight 4819 from Minneapolis to Toronto, operated by subsidiary Endeavour Air, was involved in a single aircraft accident upon landing at Toronto Pearson. The plane was carrying 4 crew and 76 passengers, among them 22 Canadians. Flight attendants, flight crews, and airport emergency workers and responders mounted a textbook response, reaching the site within minutes and quickly evacuating the passengers. At the time, there were 21 injured passengers, ranging from minor to critical but not life-threatening injuries. A total of 19 passengers went to the local hospitals, with 2 more going to hospitals in the time period after. At this time, Delta Airlines has reported that 19 of those passengers have been released and 2 remain hospitalized.
Toronto Pearson Airport President and CEO Deborah Flint at a news conference today at the airport. Canada's Transportation Safety Board is leading the investigation into the crash, and the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, has sent a team of U.S. investigators to assist. KWCH-TV, Wichita, Kansas, reports that Clifford Law Offices, an aviation law firm in Chicago, filed the first known legal actions Tuesday on behalf of a victim of American Airlines Flight 5342, which took off from Wichita on January 29th and crashed following a mid-air collision with an Army helicopter in Washington, D.C. Casey Crafton, 40 years old, of Salem, Connecticut, was one of 67 people killed on the flight, which crashed into the Potomac River. 3 people on the helicopter were killed. The legal action for $250 million against government entities was filed on behalf of his widow, Rachel, and their 3 children. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington sent to your inbox every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.